Hi class, in this video we're going to set up our Ipam server. So far I have my NAT router, my DC1, DC2, DHCP1, DHCP2, PAM, EDNS1, EDNS2, and our web server booted. I also went and I updated our map with a new IP address, which is 172.16.0.6. That's the next available IP in that subnet. Now, our IPM server is a server that allows us to manage our DNS server and our DHCP server from one machine. And the reason for this is we want to be able to create a non-privileged user account, meaning a non-domain account, and allow us to manage DNS and DHCP from that non-privileged user account. So the first thing I'm going to do is configure IPAM. The last time we used the Ipm server, we were just using it as a DNS client. So I'm going to go and assign the IP address. Again, our IP address is 172.16.0.6. Our gateway is our router, which is 0.1. Our DNS servers are 172.16.0.2 and 0.3. These are our two DNS servers. I'm going to rename it and join it to the domain. Again, make sure you put a backslash there, not a forward slash. And I'm using our standard password. I'm going to pause while it's rebooting. Sorry, I hit the wrong keystroke there when I try to pause it. So now I'm going to sign back in. It's done rebooting. I'm going to make sure I go to other user. I don't want to sign in as a local admin. I want to sign in as a domain admin because I need to remotely manage our DNS servers and DHCP servers from this IPM server. I'm going to wait till this blue bar stops so I can install software. I'm going to click on Manage, Add Roles and Features. Now up until this point, we've installed stuff from server roles. What we want to do now is we want to install a feature. So I'm going to choose Ipam, excuse me, IP Address Management Server. Click Add the tools that it needs to perform. It's also going to install our group policy management so we don't have to keep jumping over to the DC. This group policy management allows me to push policies or settings out to all the machines on my network without me having to sign into each individual machine. It's nice that they added it in 2012 and earlier. That wasn't added. I don't even think it was there in 2016. So it gives us the ability to manage our group policies from this machine directly. But when I manage the group policies, I'm actually making changes to the DCs, but I'm just doing it on this machine. So if you're not signed in as a domain admin, you won't be able to do that. I'm going to restart if needed. Then click install. I'm going to pause while it's installing. Okay, it's done installing for me, so I'm going to click close. Now normally we go here to manage that item we just installed. But in this particular case, it's one of the newer services, so you manage Ipam from right here. All this is a glorified browser. So Microsoft is backing away from these old style tools, going with a new method. So we're going to use the new method to manage Ipam. So I'm going to click on Ipam, and then we have to go through these steps. This is the new way of doing things. You configure it by going through all these steps. So the first step I'm going to do is step 1, which is already done, connecting to the Ipam server. In this particular case, our Ipam server is on the same box. So we're going to provision our Ipam server. So I'm going to click provision the Ipam server. And it gives you a little overview about what Ipam does. It's going to allow you to control the DHCP server, the DNS server, a network policy server, which I haven't shown you yet, and the Active Directory domain controller. Not all functions of the Active Directory domain controller, but more like things like DNS on that Active Directory domain controller and the group policies, and I'll show you that. We can have two ways to do IPAM managed or unmanaged. We're going to do managed, and it allows us to actually make changes. And we're going to provision everything with the GPO. We can manually provision everything, which means you're going to have to go to each machine that you want to manage, like these two machines right here and these two machines right here, and open up all the ports that you would need for this IPAM to remotely connect to these 4 servers and do the things that it needs. That would be too much work. So we're going to do managed, and allows us to automatically open up all these ports that we need on these 4 machines using a group policy object. It really cuts down administrative effort. So we're going to click next. And we have 2 types of databases that we can use. An internal, it's called a JET database, or if we have a Microsoft SQL Server, we can use that. We're going to use this internal database. So basically, it's going to pull information from these 4 machines and put it in this database. We're going to do group policy based provisioning, meaning we're going to allow our group policy to configure the machines for us. This wizard doesn't actually provision our IPM server. It just sets up the database. When we're done, we have to run this invoke IPAM GPO provisioning applet to, actually they call it a commandlet, to actually do the provisioning. So once we're done with this portion of the wizard, we have to go to PowerShell and run that command. If you're going to take the certification exam, you will have to know that command. That right there is going to actually do the provisioning. You'll have to memorize that PowerShell command for the certification test. Everyone who's taken it has had to had that question about that IPM server. It's going to try to create GPOs for these machines and open up all the ports that it needs. It's going to create the database. It's going to schedule tasks, meaning certain times during the day, it's going to query those machines and pull the data and put it in the database. It's going to create some security groups. Because remember, I said that the whole purpose of this is to allow a non-privileged user to manage DNS and DHCP from this Ipam server. So basically, the user will be able to manipulate changes in the database that's on this Ipam server. Then the Ipam server will push that data back to the appropriate server, whether it's a DNS server, a DHCP server, or NPS server. We're not going to use Ipam to manage this NPS server because we don't have it set up yet. And it's going to enable whoever gets on this machine to look where all their IPs are being used on what machines. I'm going to click apply. It's going to take a few minutes. I'm going to pause the video. Okay, it's done. So I'm going to go here. You can use PowerShell or PowerShell IC. I'm going to do PowerShell IC. Doesn't matter which. I'm using PowerShell IC so I can show you the command up here. So I'm going to type invoke Ipam and I hit the tab key if you don't remember it. You don't have tab key when you take the certification test. So the domain is contoso.com. The GPO prefix is this is what I entered in the wizard. I'm going to close this little box so I have more room. The fully qualified domain name of the Ipam server, fully qualified domain name is ipam.contoso.com. And I could delegate control of this Ipam server to a particular user or a particular group. I'm not going to do that, but that's kind of the point. If you wanted to use to allow a user to manage DHCP, DNS remotely. I'm I'm going to skip this step, but in reality, you might want to put a user account in it here, or you can create a group and delegate to that group. So any user in that group would be able to do it. And the last I'm going to do force. Okay. This service is finicky to set up. In 2019, it throws up some dialog boxes that don't make sense. In 2016 and earlier, we didn't have this issue, but we just have to go with the flow. So I'm going to hit enter. So I'm going to hit the play button with the little script behind it. So it's going to create my GPOs now to manually configure all these boxes, all these servers. See, here's the dialog boxes that I was talking about. Do you want to continue? Just click yes. Do you want to continue? Just click yes. Do you want to continue? Just click yes. If you have issues, you might need to reboot and rerun this. Okay, so now the provisioning is done. I'm just going to minimize this box. If I go here, I can't go there yet. So I'm going to click close on this box. Now I'm going to go here to tools, under group policy management. So all the group policies are stored under this folder called group policy objects. This is where you create them and this is where they're stored. Then once you create a group policy, you got to link it to a container. In this case, we're going to link it to our domain. It's already linked for us. So right now, if I click on Ipam DC DNS, no one is going to get this policy because it's linked here, and every object in this domain, whether it's a computer account or a user account, will read that policy. But until you put something in this filter box, no one will apply it. So when you link a policy to your domain, you specify who you want to apply that policy. Right now, nothing is done for any of our 3 new policies. If I click here, it just shows me I'm not messing with the policy, I'm messing with the link. So you can just not show that again, and you'll get the same box. I'm going to pause the video. Okay, sorry about that. I got a phone call from the advisor that I had to take. So again, it created these GPOs, that commandlet that we just ran, created these GPOs, added them, linked them to our domain, but nothing is set as far as who's going to apply them yet. So I'm going to go back to the wizard. So we did this step, and then we ran the commandlet. Now we're going to do this step. This step is going to discover all those servers in our network. In 2016, it did a pretty good job of discovering all the servers, but in 2019, it doesn't do a good job. So we might have to manually add the servers that we want to manage. DC1, DC2, DHCP1, and DHCP2. So I'm going to click Discover Servers. I'm going to get Forest. Click OK. Close this out. Then reopen it. Now my Forest is there. There's my domain. I'm just going to click Add and click OK. So that steps 1, 2, and 3 are done. So now I'm going to start discovering servers. And you'll notice up here, it's going to do a bunch of things. So it's going to run some scheduled task. I'm going to go to the command prompt. So I'm going to go to the task scheduler. And that provisioning process created these tasks as well. So when we went through the provisioning process, it created these tasks right here. So when I do things like discover a server, I'm going to be running these tasks. When I go and pull data from the server, it's going to be running these tasks. You can see right now, server discovery is running. It also defines when these tasks are being run. So that's how it's discovering the servers and pulling all the data from the servers. That's what it actually does in the background. So it's still running Discover. So this might take a few minutes. I'm going to pause the video again. It's still going. I can still watch the blue bar going across. It's still discovering. It might take 5 minutes. Okay, it's done discovering. I'm just going to close that out so it doesn't show any warnings. And now I'm going to click on step 5. And all step 5 does is take me down to here. If I want to go back to the overview, I can click back there. So step 5 is just taking me to there. So I can see I have 4 servers and they're all blocked, meaning I can't access those servers yet. So in my case, it discovered all 4 servers. If it didn't do it for you, you need to go to task and manually add the server. You would type in the fully qualified domain name, click verify, and then you choose what that server does. So I'm going to go back to the group policy management. So right now I can see that the security filters are blank on all three of our Ipam policies. So I'm going to close this out. I'm back here. So for DC1, I'm going to edit the server and choose managed. And I can see that DC1 is a DC and a DNS server. Or excuse me, DC2. I'm going to go to Tools, back to Group Policy, and look and see what I did. So when I do that, I'm going to hit refresh. It sometimes doesn't work properly. So I have to wait a minute. See, it's saying there's an inconsistency because it's still trying to replicate data between the two. But if I give it a minute, it'll show me that DC2 is now added. You got to be patient with this particular one, this particular service. So I'm going to go do the same thing to DC1. Sorry, I'm going to right click it, click Edit Server, and change it to Managed. When I change it to Manage, what I'm really doing, click OK, is it would be the same as me going to the Group Policy Management, highlighting the group policy DC NPS, click Add, and manually adding that server. Notice that the server name ends in $sign. So if it's just DC1 without a $sign, it's not part of a domain. The $sign indicates it's part of a domain. So it edited this policy, and if I go down here to DNS, it's telling me again, we're waiting for it to replicate between the two DCs. That it's showing me it edited the Ipam DNS policy and the Ipam DC underscore NPS policy. So I can see that it applied that DC1 and DC2 are going to apply this policy, and DC1 and DC2 are going to apply this policy. Nothing has been changed for the DHCP. I'm going to go back to my server manager. When I right click and edit this, I can see those are the policies it's taking care of. So I'm going to do DHCP1. I'm going to edit the server, make it managed, which is just fixing the security filter on the group policy. I'm also going to do it for DHCP2. Change it to managed. Now if I go back to my group policy, highlight DHCP, hit refresh, there's my two DHCP servers. Now that I'm telling my DHCP1 and 2 to apply this policy, I'm telling DC1 and DC2 to apply this policy, and DNS to apply DC1 and DC2 to apply the DNS policy. You can also go into the settings and look at all the settings that it's changing for each machine. We would have to do that manually if we did the manual provisioning. So we want all these changes done on each DC. It's a lot of changes, too much to do manually, I would think. So now we're telling these machines to apply these policies. So I'm going to go to each machine, sign in, and force it to reread the policies. It could take a while, because we made changes to the group policies. Group policies for computer accounts are read when they boot up, and then they're read every half hour. But I'm going to force it to reread the policies now. GP update, group policy update, force. I'm going to do the same thing to DC DNS2. going to do it to the two DHCPs as well. Group policies for computer accounts are applied when the computer boots up. Policies for user accounts are applied when the user signs in. So I could either reboot these machines, which might not be a bad idea, or just try to run GP update to get the new policies. Those policies will open up the firewall, set up some delegations, allow the Ipam to connect to this server and do things, pull data. Now I'm going to do it to DHCP2. Worst case scenario, just reboot all four of those machines. Do DC1 first, let it fully boot, DC2 second, then the two DHCPs together. When you reboot your DCs, reboot one, let it fully come up before you reboot the second one. You want to make sure that both the DCs are up when you reboot the DHCP servers. So I'm going to go back to the IPM. The other thing I want to point out is I wouldn't do this GP update force until both DCs had the policies. Remember I was getting those errors? There was an inconsistency. I wouldn't do the GP force until I stopped getting those errors. See, I'm still getting a little bit of an error. So I've been doing this for a while, so I'm comfortable moving on. You might want to wait. So once I've done that, go to each machine, refresh server access status. Am I still blocked? I'm going to do it to the next machine. So it's running a bunch of scripts to verify that it can connect to those servers. I'm going to wait till those are done. And they're done. So now I'm just going to hit refresh. So I still have two blocked. I'm going to try again. Refresh the server access status. It's still going. I can still see the bar going across. And do it to the other one. You need to make sure you got green all the way down. Hit refresh. If you don't have green, that means your GPOs aren't assigned properly. I need DC1 and 2 to read and apply this policy. I need DHCP1 and 2 to read and apply this policy. I need DNS1 and 2 to read and apply, DC1 and 2 to read and apply this policy. If they're not reading those policies, you're not going to get green. That's the only reason you're not going to get green. So now I'm going to do retrieve all server data. So I'm going to pause this again because this takes a while. So it's going to connect to those 4 machines, pull all the data from those 4 machines, and put them in the database. It takes a while. It takes a while the first time you do it. Okay, it retrieved all the server data for, sorry, it retrieved all the server data for both DNS servers and DHCP servers. Now, if I go back to inventory, we did this step. Because if I do this, click this step right here, step 6, it just does the same thing as this right here. So I just did it from here as opposed to going back to here and clicking here. You can do it either way. It shows me my IP status, my range of usable IPs that I'm assigning. It shows me the inventory about which machine is giving those IPs. Again, more ranges here. I don't have any virtualized networks. For DHCP, for DNS DHCP, if I highlight a DHCP server, I can create new scopes. I can edit scope uh, server options or properties. If I highlight a DC, I can create new zones, create conditional forwarders, which we haven't done yet. We'll do that in the next class. If I go down to DHCP scopes, I can modify my existing scope. I can duplicate it. I can create reservations. I can add super scopes, configure DHCP policies. For DNS, if I right click a zone, I can add DNS records like A records, things like that. I'm just going to create a new one and I'm going to maximize this. It will be an A record and I can say um, fake 10, 172.16.0.253. I can create the pointer record at the same time. Click OK. And so it created that um, DNS record for me. If I go to DNS, I can if I go to DNS DHCP, I can right click here, launch the old way of looking at DNS. Then I can see it hasn't updated it yet, that fake record. So you got to give it time because remember, I update the database, it's going to then send it to the actual server itself. So it's just another way of managing DNS and DHCP. Now, I've never used this in a production environment. I'm kind of old school. I like the old method, but some people might like the new method. So I'm more concerned if you get Ipam up and running, connecting to all the servers and everything is green. I'm not going to ask you to create zones or create records using this. I just want you to be able to connect to the servers, and from that point on, everything is configured. You would be able to manipulate DNS and DHCP from this utility. Um, I can't stress enough how you need to be very patient with this server. Give it time. You'll notice that I paused my video a bunch of times. This video might be an hour long, but it took me like 3 hours to do this video, just pausing it and letting it do its thing. So be patient with this service. It is going to take some time to configure. So, you could be doing other things in the meantime when you pause the video. So just be aware of that. Don't rush it. It's just going to make things worse, and it's going to frustrate you. So take your time, let it do its thing, come back, verify that it's done. Okay, that's it for this video. I will see you in the next video.